Well, we've got a Medicare levy, we've got an NDIS levy, basically. We've got a budget repair levy, or we had a budget repair levy. If you want to put more money into aged care, Joel Fitzgibbon, why can't you just cut spending in another area and use that money instead of this new tax?
One thing is certain, Peter, and that is that despite the additional money the Prime Minister put into the budget for aged care, it's not going to be enough to meet the expectations of the Royal Commissioners. So we will need a greater investment. Yes, you can make savings elsewhere. You can put up other taxes. You can repeal the stage 3 tax cuts, which, as you know, I'm absolutely opposed to doing. Or you can consider a levy, which was a matter discussed by the Royal Commissioners themselves. Look, I think most Australians care about aged care because we all have someone with a stake in the system. We all have a stake in the system. And they don't mind a levy as long as they know the levy is going to be spent on the challenge before us, spent in the right place, and spent well. So I think it's a reasonable debate. I don't have a fixed position. I haven't given a lot of thought. But I think the Australian community would be up for the conversation.
I think they're with you on aged care, but Alex Antic, I mean, a levy's a tax. It's only a levy if it gets put in for a specific purpose, and when it's legislated, it's got a mechanism to pull it out again, right? It just basically disappears after a point in time. But I've seen Labor put in plenty of levies. I can't recall one levy that Labor have ever taken off. Can you?
No, I can't, Peter, and you're quite right. I mean, ultimately, this is bracket creep, really, isn't it? I mean, you know, the coalition government has got a plan when it comes to aged care, reform, which I agree with Joel is very much on the hearts and minds of Australians. They've got a plan to spend $18 billion on some of the recommendations, and in fact, the only recommendations that are really not being considered out of the Royal Commission report are those to raise the levy in order to pay for this. We say it doesn't need to be done. We say that the services that are going to be provided are going to be A grade, are going to be appropriate, and they're going to be done all at the same time as delivering the stage 3 tax cuts, which are ultimately $137 billion over 10 years between 2024 and 2034. So, look, we know Labor thinks it's got the magic money tree. I wish I had one. If I had one, I'd plant several in the backyard. But this is real, and we're going to get on with doing the job the way it's been set out.
Now, hang on,
all right,
Peter.
Alex,
can
you're
I
in
just
the hot
say
seat
something
now.
on that?
Yes, Joel. Mm-hmm.
Can I say, I mean, John Howard and Peter Costello put levies on high income earners. They put levy on milk to do dairy industry restructuring. There have been a number of levy on guns.
Yeah,
to
but they've all come
repeal,
off, mate. They've all come
so
off.
Let's not.
They've all come off.
No, but okay, but let's not have this fiction that, you know, the Labor Party is not the only party ever to consider a levy, temporary or Joel, otherwise, and we're in opposition.
Yeah, but the point
Peter,
is,
we're in opposition.
I understand that, but mate, you'll stay in there if you keep putting taxes to the people at the next election. The issue with the levy,
that's true.
Levies have a temporary purpose. It's not a levy, it is a tax if it's there in perpetuity. Now, are you saying that you're going to put a short-term levy in to fund aged care, and then as the baby boomers end up in aged care, you're suddenly going to pull that money away? Of course you're not, right? So let's call it what it is, Joel. It's a tax.
But Labor hasn't. But Peter, Labor hasn't said that. It hasn't said it's going to introduce or promise any sort of levy, let alone say whether it would be temporary or
no, but
you
just confirmed that it's been a discussion internally for the Labor Party. It was in the Australian
Yeah, because I read it in the newspaper.
I just asked you about it. I just asked you about it.
I read it in the newspaper.
I want to go to nuclear. I want to go to nuclear power. The New South Wales government today, Productivity Commission report from the New South Wales Productivity Commission recommending lifting the ban on nuclear power. Alex Antic, you're in the hot seat here. You guys are in government in Canberra. The prohibition on energy, nuclear energy, is your prohibition. Why on earth aren't you brave enough to have a conversation about nuclear power in Australia, for Australia, if New South Wales is prepared to talk about it?
Well, I'm brave enough to do it. I wholeheartedly agree with you, Peter. I think that it's my position, personal position, that the prohibition under the EPBC Act should be lifted. And in fact, the House committee, I think, which sat last year, delivered a report which was effectively to that end. We sit here with the world's largest supply of uranium in this country. 80% of it, by the way, is here in South Australia. And yet we are the third biggest producer because, we don't have a domestic market for it. So there's a whole host of reasons why this makes enormous sense. South Australia, of course, had the scarce Royal Commission not that long ago, which effectively said, look, we need to be involved in this. We need to be involved in digging it up. We need to be involved in using it for electricity and then storing it. It wasn't acted on. Look, my view is that prohibition should be removed. Let's let the market determine whether or not it's a cost-effective way of generating power. That's the way it's meant to work.
All right, Joel, I have to go to you because I want to ask you, you're a man from the bush and you're a former MP in the agriculture portfolio. This huge news about the cyber attack on one of Australia's biggest meat processors. This is JBS Australia, headquartered out of Brisbane. They've lost all their IT systems because of the attack. People are talking about, disruption to the domestic meat supply in this country. How damaging is it?
Very damaging, Peter, and a nightmare for the company, which of course employs thousands of Australians, and it comes off the back, of course, of their ban into the China market. So it's a double whammy for this company. It didn't get JobKeeper, by the way, because the way its business arrangements, the structure of its business subsidiaries were done originally. So they've got a triple whammy in that sense. And it reminds us how vulnerable we are to these attacks now in all sorts of industries. We don't yet know, of course, where the attack came from. But sadly, we're going to have to get used to them, and we do need government doing more, working with the corporate sector to avoid them to defend against them as best we can.
All right, got to leave it there. Joel Fitzgibbon, enjoy that balmy weather in Canberra. Alex Antic, enjoy probably nicer weather in South Australia. Thank you for your time.
My
Thanks,
pleasure.
Peter.